to our Tikkun Leil Shavuot warm-up tonight. We are taking advantage of the Zoom technology to, I think, well, certainly partially compensate for the fact that we cannot be together tomorrow night through the night, Shacharis at dawn, which is one of the glories of Shavuot and one of the highlights of the whole year for me. Nevertheless, we are taking advantage of the opportunity to involve a lot of people, possibly actually more than we would be able to include on Shavuot night. The late show doesn't appeal to everyone. And tonight we're starting at around 7:45 and continuing on hopefully until we are completely sated and stimulated and edified with many contributors. I just want to also add that we have the means of incorporating, including people from actually abroad, including Rob especially, also Tobias Goldman, who's presently in Sweden, but he'll be joining us by Zoom as well. So without further ado, it's a delight for me to turn over to Carl and to Paul, who have put together a star-studded cast. I call it ALTC, Aim Low, Fly High. And so I'm looking forward to a very stimulating and, as I said, learned presentation with great variety. And without further ado, over to our first speaker.
Okay, Anthony. Well,
okay, sure.
Why don't you kick us off, Anthony?
Okay, with pleasure. So this short share is entitled "Seeing Challenges as Opportunities," and I suppose the intent of this share is to encourage us all, including myself, to carry on through these difficult and challenging times. I would like to dedicate this share to the neshama of my father-in-law, Binyamin ben Aharon. May his neshama have an aliyah to the highest of heights.
Amen.
And I'm going to share lots of short ideas with you. Now, if you don't like them and they don't mean anything to you and you get nothing from them, then they're definitely my ideas. But if you like anything that I say or anything means anything to you, credit should go to a number of different rabbis who I've listened to recently. I will name a few. They are Rabbi Moshe Meir Weiss, Rabbi Avigdor Miller, Zecher Tzaddik Livrocha, Rabbi Reuven Wolf, Rabbi Simon Jacobson, Rabbi Mendel Kessen, and Rabbi Benzion Twersky. I would also, during this short shia, be referencing a number of names much closer to home who we know very well, who have also contributed to some of these ideas. So without further ado, speaking honestly, I would say that when lockdown began and we were living through these unusual times, I was, and I hopefully still am, convinced that this was the beginning of the time of the Mashiach, that the Mashiach was going to come any day now. Why did I think that? Well, I could say there were a number of reasons. I will just take you through a few of them very quickly. The first idea that it's brought down that we will be locked down for the third occasion immediately prior to the coming of the Mashiach. The first such occasion was just before the inauguration of the Mishkan on the 1st of Nisan, where we were in a lockdown situation. And of course, during our lockdown period, we have lived through the Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So I was hoping firstly that the Mashiach would come then. And the second occasion, of course, we all know very well, was during the plagues, the 10th plague, Makos Bechoros, after putting the blood of the Korban Pesach on our lintels. We were told to stay in our homes and to avoid what was going on outside, which was the death of the firstborns, other than Pharaoh. And then therefore this was to be, and hopefully this still is, the third occasion and final occasion. And so I was pretty hopeful that this was a good sign, but I really hope that this would happen before there was too much suffering, that it would happen very quickly. And I suppose that's really the source of my disappointment, that as of yet, it's not quite happened. The next idea I'll give you, there was a method called Atbash, where you can play with the letters and you can swap them around. In this case, I would like to swap the Kuf, which is the fourth last letter of the Jewish alphabet, with the fourth letter of the alphabet, which is Daled. So COVID would become Dovid. 19, of course, COVID-19. 19 are actually the gematria of the hidden letters in the name of Havaya, the Tetragrammaton, Yud K Vav K. If you spell it out, the Yud obviously is Vav Daled, which is 10. Hey is Hey Aleph. You take the 1 for the Aleph. The Gematria would make you up to 11. Then you've got Vov, where you take the Aleph from the Vov, which takes you up to 18. Then the final Hey would take you up to 19. So COVID-19, the idea that this 19 is hidden in the same way the virus is hidden, like Hashem is hidden. And yet, obviously, Hashem is so powerful. This virus, unfortunately, is so powerful. And the idea that COVID-19, David-19, obviously David being obviously the Mashiach would be a descendant of David HaMelech. The idea was this was a clear sign for me. It's the year 5780, the end of a decade, the beginning of a new decade, which the Rabbi talks about being extra powerful. So you've got that. Obviously, 8 to the 80 is beyond the 7, which is this nature. 8 is beyond this world, like Hanukkah. So the idea that this was a supernatural event just about to happen any minute, maybe it still will, hopefully it will, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow night on Shavuot, maybe the next day, but certainly, please God, soon. And I suppose the final thing I'll reference is the idea that Israel has failed pretty much to put together a government for a very long time now. And I was hoping that that was because there was a vacuum that would be filled by the Moshiach. May it happen very soon. So I suppose, I went through those feelings, maybe others did too. And what I'd like to say to myself and others is that we need to stay strong and stay positive and make the most of what's facing us so that we can bring about the Kingdom of the Moshiach. And Rabbi Mendel Kessen references this quite a lot, and he explains that Yisurin suffering is the way it is. It's part of the Tikkun process, part of the process that can bring the Moshiach. Obviously, ideally, they would happen without suffering, through the Jewish people performing all the mitzvahs and redeeming those final sparks. But we know that it's a possibility that actually the Tikkun comes from suffering. And I say that mainly to give us, maybe so we can look at the suffering in a more positive light, if we know that it's helping ushering the redemption that is around the corner. I'd also like to say that we have plenty of opportunities during these difficult times to perform chesed. We obviously perhaps have more time with our children than we ever had before. And so we can use this time to teach them Torah, which is obviously referenced in the Shema, twice in the Shema. We can set a good example for them, as the Rabbi said. Children learn from not what we say, but what we do. And we have an amazing opportunity to lead by example and to show them the right way to live and how to react, to be patient, to be understanding, particularly around the family. It's very important in this time that we are patient and understanding. The Rabbi mentioned during his Pirkei Avot, Shirim, obviously this is the time between Pesach and Shavuot where we learn to grow. The Rabbi talked about the importance of silence. I certainly would recommend, if there are those around us struggling with lockdown, that we stay silent and understanding during these difficult times. Of course, we can be inspired by the ideas that Carl has been sharing with us from Mesilas Yesharim, from the Ramchal, from Rabbi Yisrael Salant, and of course, Abraham Twersky. All these ideas we have a chance to inculcate and apply every day. Even though we're in lockdown, we actually have a chance to do that. And we can do that to those around us that probably mean the most to us, our family, for those of us able to be with our family. And I would encourage all of us, especially myself, to make the most of what we're learning. Yaakov has taken us through the every day of the Omer, taken us through each of the specific ideas about how we can grow in these 50 days and make the most of it. So thanks to all those that have inspired and continue to inspire. And I would like to, encourage us all to make the most of these ideas and apply them to those that we love around us. Of course, the other thing that we can do with probably the more time that we have is to learn Torah. Thank you to Stephen Shenkin for his inspirational good mornings every day that I very much love. And for those that are doing the DAF, I encourage you to carry on doing the DAF. And I'd like to maybe give you an extra encouragement. Maybe we can achieve a double merit here. The merit, of course, of learning Torah, but also of proving to Hashem that with added time, if we fill that time with more Torah, we get credit for the time we didn't manage to spend on Torah because we were busy with work and life. But by doing it now, we prove that we really wanted to do it then too, but we just didn't have the time. And maybe we can get extra merit through that thought and through the dedication to Torah. that we can all apply now. And you know, if we can, so just to kind of bring it all together, hopefully I've shown. I'd actually like to say a few more acts of chesed that we could do. Obviously, acts of charity. Particularly at the moment, no doubt many Jewish organizations are suffering because donors are suffering. So those that are able, I encourage you to give, particularly at this time. It would be so important. And around our kids, maybe we should show them to make sure they're saying brachas before they eat. We're around more. We can remind them to say the brachas. That could be very powerful for them. And we can continually give our children love and support. Maybe at school they don't always get that. So we have no idea what powerful effect we can have by doing these things on our children. So I suggest that we do that and then hopefully reap the rewards in due course. And I hope that I've shown you that actually, the Rabbi mentioned this recently in one of his Pirkei Avot Shirim, the idea that the world stands on three things. Torah, we can still do Torah. Gemilas Chasodim, acts of kindness, we can still do plenty of acts of kindness. Maybe more focused on the home, but nothing stops us picking up a phone to somebody alone, somebody who we feel might be suffering. There are so many chances to still do chesed, and of course the final one that the world stand on is avodah, prayer. And although admittedly we can't pray as a community like we all wish, and we can't pray amongst a minyan, and I know that those that are suffering of bereavement are particularly upset about the lack of ability to say Kaddish in the merit of the Mesa, of the neshama of the deceased, but we can still daven, and we need to realize how lucky we are that we can still do all these things. And maybe with the davening, because we're not rushing to shul or rushing from shul, maybe we can daven a bit slower, maybe understand what we're saying a bit more, and we can get more out of it. And I suppose, in summary, we are living through difficult, challenging times, but the challenges bring in merit. The actually staying indoors, I should say, staying indoors is pekuach nefesh, is something that's more powerful than Shabbos in terms of it overrides Shabbos. Saving lives, our own lives or those of others, actually is a humongous mitzvah. So we can be continuously dealing with the suffering in a positive way. That's merit. We can stay indoors and protect the lives of ourselves and others. That's a continuous mitzvah. Plus, if we then use our time learning Torah, doing acts of chesed and davening with more intent. And here I'd like to quote David Nahal, who in his boot camp, you know, if you apply intent, your mind, to your exercises, to your breathing, to the muscles, it has a greater effect. And so does mitzvahs. If you can apply intent to everything that you do, all of these things that I've highlighted that you're probably all doing anyway, but if you can now do it with extra meaning and extra intent, you'll bring extra value and extra merit. And please God, those combined merits of all of us will finally bring about the Geula, and may the Mashiach come sweet in our days. B'mei Yameinu, Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Very nice. Awesome. Hi to everyone who's just joined, the Rome's Michael Yaakov. Now we're going to Gina, and then we'll do Rob after.
Hi everyone. It's been quite a while since I've seen most of you, so it's good to connect. I'm going to talk a little bit about the eye and perception, and I'm going to start off by showing you a few pictures. You've probably seen these pictures before, but it's just to illustrate a point I wanted to make. So this is a picture that has some visual tricks or optical illusions. I'm sure most of you have seen it before. Our eye plays a trick on us, and we see the image that comes first to our brain. In this picture, there's two profiles in the black. Alternatively, if your eye was drawn to the white, you see a beautiful white vase in the center of the picture. The picture has two images that our eyes can see, depending on which one our eyes see first.
I see a Kiddush cup.
You see a Kiddush cup. Yeah, a Kiddush cup or a vase, exactly. So this is quite a well-known one. I have another one over here, which is less well-known, but it's also just to show the point. If you look carefully, it's the image you can see is the face of a horse's face going into some water. And if you look more closely, a little bit more difficult to see, you can actually see that there's a frog or a toad sitting on a lily pad. Yeah, it's our eyes. They perceive what we want them to perceive in a picture, and sometimes we need people to point it out to us. It's not always so clear when we look at the picture. Some people may actually not see the two pictures until they've been pointed out to them.
The kitchen.
And there are many more pictures like this. I just wanted to show these two to you as an example of the visual tricks that our eyes on us. In the world of sensory stimulation of sounds and smells and sights, our eyes are our primary interface with the world, and they actually account for 80% of what we learn. The Maharal of Prague, who lived in the 15th century, he made the observation that of the 5 senses, 4 of them are on the most part objective, but sight is really something that is subjective. A person sees the things that he wishes to see. And this subjective nature of vision allows for the concept of the Ein Tova and Ein Ra. In other words, we see the world we see the world the way we want to see the world, and it's based on our inner understanding of the world. So I'd like to begin by looking at the Hebrew word for eye, which is ayin. It begins with the letter ayin, which is also the name of the letter, and it is the name of the eye as well. It's the 16th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and it has a gematria of 70. I know Stephen's going to be talking about gematria a little bit later, but it's something that I always find fascinating. Interestingly, the ayin is also a silent letter. It's one of the guttural letters that actually takes its sound from the vowels underneath the letter. So it's this ayin that actually sees and doesn't speak that actually represents true humility. If we look at the gematria of the letter, which is 70, there's 70 mentioned several times in the Chumash, in our stories. There are 70 years in exile in Babylonian. There's the 70 members of the Sanhedrin. There are 70 names of Hashem. There are 70 words in Kaddish. A man's allotted lifespan is said to be 70, which is 70. There were 70 members of Jacob's family who went down into Egypt. And there were 70 languages and nations of the world. Now I'm going to look at the last 2 just to really understand that actually 70 represents unity and disunity. It's really a double-sided coin, very similar to our eyes. So in Shemot, in chapter 1, verse 5, it says, in Jacob's household traveled down to Egypt, all of the offsprings of Jacob, 70 soul. It uses the word shiv'im nefesh. So it should be, nefesh should be plural, it should be nefashot, but it uses the single word for nefesh. And this implies that when Jacob's family went down to Egypt, the 70 of them, they went down as one family, one man, one soul with one goal. But earlier on in history, at the time of Noah, when the group arose that came to build what was later known as the Tower of Babel, there was a punishment for their rebellion against Hashem, and Hashem caused each man to speak a different language so that he wouldn't understand his fellow man. And the different languages separated from each other and all formed 70 nations of the world. So this unity came from 70, and true unity also came from 70. So we see that the ayin, the 70, can really go either way, and it really depends on how we use it. It's our decision. In the Gemara in Masechet Moed, in reference to Rosh Hashanah, it says that hearing the testimony, in the reference to Rosh Chodesh and seeing the sighting of the new moon, it said that hearing their testimony should not be greater than actually seeing the new moon. And we learn from this that the power of seeing is actually greater than the power of hearing. And we see this phenomenon again at Har Sinai, when Hashem tells Moshe about the golden calf, but actually only after Moshe sees the golden calf, he internalizes it, and that's when he smashes the luchot. In Devarim, it says, don't stray after your heart and eyes. And we say this in the Shema daily. Interestingly, it's the men who now need to look at their tzitzit at this point and to kiss them in the morning Shema to show their intention of focusing their eyes and not to stray. Our eyes are our primary interface with the world, and society places a very big emphasis on the visual. If it looks good, it must be good. And the Torah teaches us not to be misled by our eyes. Rashi explains that the heart and the eyes are spies of the body. The eyes see, the heart desires, and the body goes out to perform the sin. Originally from the Sefer of Chinuch, which was written in the 13th century by a Spanish scholar as a book for a Sefer of the 613 mitzvot from a father to his son, he comments that there are 6 mitzvot which are perpetual and constant and applicable of all times, all days of our life. And the Chofetz Chaim discusses them and the application of this mitzvot. And he comments, he says, there are 6 mitzvot whose obligation is constant. And every time and every second a person thinks about them, it is as if he fulfills a positive commandment. And the reward for these mitzvahs is infinite. And it's no surprise that one of these constant 6 mitzvot is, I will not stray from Hashem with my heart or my eyes. Our souls are evident no more than in our eyes. And while fingerprints have like 40 unique characteristics, our eyes have 256, which is a gematria or a number we should be familiar with the positive mitzvahs. So our eyes convey a very unique sense of warmth and emotion. They are windows to our soul. When we connect with people, we look in their eyes. When we agree with people, we see eye to eye. Our eyes are very powerful, and they a very good connection into our soul. And I just want to touch on a point that is, it's so beautiful. It needs a lot more time than we have this evening. But I think the concept of it is so powerful. The Rabbi said that the knowledge of the observer creates the reality. And this is very much supported in quantum science. It says that there were many scientists who have said that the conscious observer causes the wave function to collapse. So basically, the quantum observer is a participating observer who creates the reality by the act of his observation. In other words, we're not passive observers, but rather our participation as observers, our seeing is what actually collapses the wavelength and creates the reality. And this is a very, very powerful thought. According to Torah, the way we see things affects the things that we are actually viewing. So if a person's intentions are pure and he has a positive energy, he actually creates a positive energy around him. And there are several examples in the Torah that I would love to go through, and some sources, but I haven't got time to fit them in. But it's the purposes of the spies. The purposes of the spies when they went into the land was actually to infuse the land with spirituality and to make it a place for Bnei Israel to actually inhabit. They weren't supposed to go and seek out this land and spy out what was there. They were supposed to go into the land and they were supposed to actually infuse it with their vision. They were supposed to make it a habitable land for Bnei Israel. And Yeshua and Caleb actually did that, but the other spies failed on their mission. If we understand deeply that what we see is actually a reflection of who we are and how we choose to perceive things, then we can choose to perceive things in a really positive and uplifting way and actually make a change in this world. So when we are negative, our ayin ra'ah appears, and we need to concentrate and go deep inside ourselves and change that reflection of our light or our sight to see differently, more positively. It was Wayne Dyer, the famous psychologist, who said, when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. And I read something, or I heard something interesting a few weeks ago, that when lockdown started at the end of March, there was a 300% increase in the sales of puzzles. And on the surface, it says, well, you know, puzzles are a lovely family activity and everyone can participate. But on a larger scheme, puzzles, everyone has the participation of putting small pieces together to see a much larger picture. And once we see the larger picture, we feel more worthwhile, that we are this tiny little piece in this larger picture called life. And obviously Hashem has this larger picture and we aren't privy to it a lot of the time. But if we understand that our actions and whatever we're doing and whatever's happening in this world is just part of a greater plan that we unfortunately can't see from this angle, it helps us through this journey and get through any challenging times. I'm just going to end off with a story, a beautiful story that was told by Simon Wiesenthal, who was a Holocaust survivor who lived in, who passed away in 2005. He survived 5 camps, and he tells a story of being at a service shortly after the liberation, where Rabbi Silver, who was an American rabbi whose mission it was to comfort and to provide aid for survivors, invited Wiesenthal to join other survivors in prayer. Wiesenthal declined and explained why. He told Rabbi Silver that while he was in the camp, a religious man had managed to smuggle in a siddur, and at first he had admired the man and thought he was courageous in smuggling a siddur in. But the following day, to his horror, the man was renting out his siddur in exchange for bread. And each day the queues got bigger and bigger, and people would trade their bread in for just a chance to daven from the siddur, just for a few minutes. And the owner of the siddur was enjoying much more food than any of the other inmates. And he said he was horrified that someone could use a siddur to rob people of the bread that they actually needed for survival. And if this is how religious people behaved, he wanted nothing to do with it. And Rabbi Silver replied to him, why did you spend so much time focusing on the one man who used his siddur to take food out of starving people's mouths? Did it ever occur to you in all those years about all those people who gave up their bread, their very chance of survival, just to pray from a siddur? I mean, how wonderful is that? And Simon Wiesenthal says that from that day onwards, he decided to attend services. So our life is all about perspective and having a positive one and seeing the positive, and not just seeing the positive, but actually protecting our eyes from avoiding seeing the negative and the dark images, whether it's true or false or fake news or Instagram or Facebook or whatever it is. What has been seen can never be unseen. We are in control. We need to change our focus. We need to look what we have. We need to see the good in everything, and we need to start each and every day with something inspiring, because the more gratitude we have, the more in our life there is to be grateful for. Our spiritual health actually depends on controlling our eyes and using them for the positive, our eye and talk. And 100 years ago, the Chofetz Chaim raised awareness and the importance of guarding our tongues from Lashon Hara. But today, with the explosion of social media and digital images and complete visual overload, especially now with so much Zoom and so much technology, especially for us and our children, the time is right now to strengthen our commitment to guarding our eyes and to living with an Ein Tovah and a really positive outlook and a positive perspective. Hope you have a good Yom Tov.
Shkoyach. Terrific.
Well done.
That was
Very
great,
nice.
Gina. Thank you very much.
Very nice.
Gina, booking you in next year, or before that, because I have an idea up my sleeve that I think you'll like.
Okay. Great. So now we go to the north of Israel and Rob Rome.
Hello, everyone. Good to see everyone. Thank you for giving me a slot. And sorry, I think I missed my original slot because I was engaged elsewhere working.
We'll give you your place back at Kesher.
Thank you. There we go. Turning up late. No, so I'm also going to confess, following Universal Gina, that what you said was lovely, very inspiring, and it's going to make what I say seem very insignificant. And I say that as much else because I've not put half profession. You've obviously put into that as well, but thank you for that. And I'm, yeah, to be honest, I actually spoke to Carl today and said, Carl, is this still going ahead? Because I haven't really prepared much. And he said, yeah, give it a go. Say whatever comes to your mind. So I will do that. And also, actually, I want to start by, it's interesting what Gina just said about the eye. And I think there's I couldn't agree more. The way people perceive things is really important. And I've always said that on one hand, two people have the same lives and same experiences, and what they actually hits them, what happens to them, but have very different perceptions on that. But I think also there's the physical as well. And I think the physical is important. And that physical is something which, you know, and this is not meant to be a coming of Israel rant, or not rant, tirage, but yeah, to coming of Israel. But no, living here in Israel, you really do, it's a very, very different experience actually being part of what is in the Torah, part of what we do and learn and say every day, and actually there being in it and being part of it. And as I said, some people know it's doing the mitzvot of Israel, which are additional to sometimes than those which you have in Hasaretz. Things like meistering. We now have a very garden with overgrown, not overgrown, but we've got vegetables, etc., growing in our garden now, which we are using and eating. And it's realised that you can't just go and Israel pick vegetables from your garden. That there are obligations associated with that, which involve, to some extent, obviously, they're very much linked back to the days of the Beit HaMikdash, but actually also they're still relevant today. So there are brachot to say, there is meistering to be done, there are things which you don't necessarily think about at home. And I think that whole physical involvement of all really helps bring it home to you, and it's quite special in a way. Although equally can be quite stressful if you don't quite know what you're meant to be doing, and people say, "Oh, you've done this, haven't you?" And again, I don't know what you're talking about. So we're learning as we go. But that was just an observation, and that wasn't what I was going to talk about briefly. I feel that it would be remiss of me not to talk about Nach and the Nach journey which I've been on, and technically should have finished, but I've got about 2 or 3 days left. I apologize, Rabbi Simon, for that. You may be up to date, but I'm not quite there. But I'm holding back because I don't want to finish. But the Nach journey, which I started on January, said Rabbi Simon, on January the 1st, 2018, and was finished. The cycle finished. I think it was Saturday, about Sunday.
This past Sunday.
And I believe Anthony is now one of the new participants in the next cycle along. And just what have I got from that journey? I'm not going to start quoting lots of pieces because I haven't honestly prepared much. But what struck me about Nach is it's such a core part of our history and who we are and what we are. And there's so much rich sort of information and unbelievable thoughts within there, which most people don't read or get close to, because we touch Nach in the only really for the Megillot and for the Haftarot. And apart from that, we do very little else. We don't go through it and actually read it and look at it. And then there are the stories we know from Cheder. But to really get and be part of it, it is our history. It's you really get to feel and experience and live what they lived and at the time, be it King David, King Solomon, King Saul, you got the prophet, you got so much in there. I mean, for me, the highlights for me actually interesting. The books which left me with most sort of wanting more were on the one hand Melachim, Kings. As I said to you before, it's full of emotion, battle, winning, losing, relationships, etc. But also the other book which I found fascinating was the book of Job, Eov, which I think is probably not one of the obvious ones people would normally pick, but the really quite deep philosophical sort of nature of the book, and taking it not on face value but looking behind it into it to see what we get out of it. And I think there's a lot there. And I think I was going to say is again, these are to some extent real people, and their views on whether Eov was a real person or was a representation of, but I won't discuss that for now. But it's the seeing the lives which they led in the way that they led it, and you really have the opportunity, and I guess and I think not the flip side of what Gina said, but I think actually aligning to that is also there is that physicality, there is that being part of it, there is that being in it, and I think that's what my Nach journey has really brought to me, is this additional sort of connection to these Torah figures, because they're no longer a story. King Saul, Shavuot, he's no longer just a person. He's an individual who had troubled, who was a troubled individual who was quite manic in his approach. You had, and other people like that. It's throughout. Because it's been. It is with with Hashem's influence. It's written by the people who are there at the time, whether it's the prophets or people like King David, etc. And you really get a lot out of that. And I think there's a lot to be said for everyone. I recommend highly. The next cycle has started, I believe, on the 25th. So I believe Anthony is part of that. So last Monday, there's still time to catch up, and I would highly recommend for anyone to to get involved and to give it a go. I admitted to be a few days behind, but 2 years and however many months in to be 3 days behind, I think it's still a relatively good achievement for me, and I'm quite proud of that. So, you know, they're very accessible, and I would really just, that's my message as much as an advert as a message is, you know, get involved, get stuck in, and I think Tanakh is a way which really gives the opportunity to get a feel for what's happening. So I will leave it there.
Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah, that was great, Rob. And Rob, what's the best site for Nachomi?
Well, the best site, if you sign up, Rabbi Daniel Rowe,
Daniel Fine.
Danny Fine. You know, I'll put the link on the group. Okay, should I do that?
Yeah.
It's really good, and he has a book as well.
He has a book, and in fact, the book's in Kesher. There's a copy in Kesher which we bought. I think it's Hillis Bar Mitzvah from memory, yes. But there's a copy there. But basically, every week he sends out the translation, the text and the translation, and some very short thoughts which are based on his book. But also it depends. So I took it upon myself to try and go beyond that, and you know, whether it's for the art school or the whatever book, I would always try and go into much more depth, sometimes more effectively than others, depending on the time available. And you know, it really is genuinely a very, very rewarding experience. And as I said, it gives you a chance to get stuck in something you wouldn't normally get stuck into. And I'm not going to lie to you now, because someone said recently, "Oh, how much do you remember?" And the honest answer is, there's probably a lot of it that has come and gone, but it's there. And actually, then when I start thinking about it, you know, things do come to me. You look at Haftarah right now, have a whole new meaning, because I'm not just looking at Haftarah. You know, this week just gone was the Haftarah of Machar Rosh Chodesh, or every should I say. And it starts, but it's only there because there's this relationship. We got Jonathan, who says to David, to the Rosh Chodesh, and that's what this comes from. But then knowing the whole story around it, suddenly it brings a lot more into it, and the context is sometimes very important. So anyway, do it.
Great.
If I'm not mistaken, Yoel Strauss was also following the program with us, and he said that he was listening to I think 10 minutes a day per chapter, like daily, from the OU, the people in New York. I think there was about 10 minutes.
Yeah. There was a podcast. It seemed to vary actually, depending on which book and who was. Each book was done by a different rabbi. But yeah, they're good podcasts. Yeah, there are, and there's different ways of accessing it. Depends what your poison is. Is it reading it? Is it listening to things? Is it, you know, getting stuck into behind the scenes? You know, whatever works for you. But it's, yeah, do it.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Well done, Rob.
Rabbi Simon, is Ruthie there?
She is here. She was listening. She was listening to Gina. She's just stepped away. Shall I tell her that we'd like to encourage her to take the stage?
If she's there. Otherwise, we could. Jeremy, why don't you go ahead, and then we'll do Rabbi Ruthie after.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go do that. I'll alert her.
If you don't mind, I just need 5 minutes because I need to put Charlotte to bed.
What kind of excuse is that?
Really sorry.
That is no excuse, Jeremy. You're going to have to come up with a better excuse than that.
I'm back in 5 minutes.
Okay, sure.
Is it it's too early to David Mariv, isn't it?
No, not for me.
We can if we want, or I don't mind stepping up to the plate now if we're looking for.
That sounds good.
To fill the time. Okay.
Yeah. Hey, Rabbi.
Hey, thank you. Okay, right. Because I anticipated that we'd hear quite a lot of philosophy and Musar, some general reflections. I like to do something halachic. It may not have the same inspirational value, but as I said, for the variety of it. And I like to talk within the few minutes that is allocated to each of us about the mitzvah of Shnaim Mikra ve'echad Targum. That is to say, the mitzvah of reading the just going to adjust my screen here. Reading the Torah portion week by week in the Hebrew text twice and in the translation once. So I'd like to just begin with a little well-known anecdote, actually from the Lubavitch Hasidic dynasty. The first Rebbe said something along these lines, and there are kind of other stories around the same idea, but the punchline is very simple, that the Baal HaTanya once said to his Talmidim, a man has to live with the times. And they thought this was unusual, coming from the great master who normally encourages people to draw on the ancient, venerable, eternal wisdom of yore, rather than trying to keep up with modern times. What does he mean when he says a man has to live with the times? And then he explained himself to mean that a person should live his life in step with the weekly Torah portion. That as the Jewish people, Klal Yisrael, week by week, we read a different parsha sequentially until we complete the cycle, and then we begin it anew. So every week there is some insight, there's some aspect of the Torah reading which sheds light on our own circumstances or on contemporary events. So this is the idea of living with the times, and I think partly for that reason the rabbis established the practice of the Talmud says Le'olam yashlim adam parshiosav im hatzibur. A person should always ensure that he completes the reading of the parsha with the tzibur, with the congregation. So if we're reading, for example, this coming Shabbos, not the immediate upcoming, but the following Parshas Naso. So in the days before Parshas Naso, a person should read that portion twice in the Hebrew and once in translation. Okay, the Talmud adds on that this, whoever does this, it's a skula for arichas yamim, for longevity. So it's associated with the sort of divine blessing of long life. And again, if a person is in step with the times, if he week by week plugs into the eternal message and teachings of the Torah, it doesn't mean he'll live forever, but it's seen as a segula for extending his life. The origins of it in terms of how ancient is that practice are not entirely clear. As I said, is mentioned in the Talmud. Some suggest it goes back to even biblical times. It's doubtful whether that's actually the case. What is the reason for it? Meaning, why isn't it sufficient to rock up to shul every Shabbos, hear the Torah reading? And by the way, that's possibly the earliest known example in all of human history of public adult education. The public reading of the Torah is the earliest example of that we find. So why does a person have to read the Torah on his own in addition to that? So there are three possible reasons which are suggested. One is that it was originally instituted for a place where there is no minyan. Well, that's very pertinent to all of us in Britain today and much of the world where we don't have access to a minyan, so we don't hear the Torah reading in the normal way. So perhaps it was intended for people who live in a small village or someone whose circumstances prevent him from going to hear the Torah reading publicly, so he's encouraged to read it on his own. It doesn't exactly explain why he needs to read it twice and then a third time in the translation. Another possible explanation is that quite a practical one. Until medieval times, it was common practice. In fact, in some communities, it remained common practice even until almost our own times, where a person who is called to the Torah opens the Torah, says the blessing, and reads out loud with the ta'amim. And when he's finished, he makes the bracha, he closes the Sefer Torah, and the next person comes up and does the same, which means that either he's alerted in advance that we're going to call you for Revi or for Chamishi this Shabbos, or more likely, it was understood that every member of the congregation has the skill, the proficiency to walk up to the Torah and read the portion. If that's the case, and it was the case for a long, long time, that was the norm, the recommendation is simply so that a person won't be caught out. He won't be embarrassed by stepping up to the Torah and he doesn't know where to begin, where to end, where the psukim begin and end. He can't chant it properly, can't pronounce the words because it's not familiar to him and he doesn't know the cantillation notes. So therefore the rabbi said, don't be caught out. Every person should be preparation, and when you come to shul, you don't know when you're going to be called to the stage, so you've got to be able to perform. So therefore, review it twice in the Hebrew. It doesn't explain why he needs to do the Targum. Why does he need to study it also in the translation or read it in the translation? Because when he gets up to the Sefer Torah, if he starts chanting the translation, they'll send him down. He needs to chant the Torah. But I think the explanation may be quite simple. Anyone, bar mitzvah boys, maybe others can relate to this as well. If you not that we have bar mitzvah boys on this Zoom call, but we have some boys who maybe remember their bar mitzvah. We have some parents of bar mitzvah boys as well. It's quite common, and I was as guilty of this as probably any of us. When I was bar mitzvah, I did a smashing job, if I say so myself. I didn't understand what I was saying. I didn't know the meaning. I didn't know the purpose. I didn't understand the deeper explanation, even the translation, even the simple explanation was not within my grasp. I basically
You feel that way about your English vocabulary sometimes.
Okay. So if you understand what you're saying, because Aramaic was the lingua franca at the time, Aramaic was a language which they all spoke and they all understood. So the Hebrew may have been perhaps beyond their understanding, but if you read the Targum, if a person prepares it with the Targum so that he understands what he's saying, it makes it easier to read it and to chant it correctly. When you're only chanting it and you don't even know what it means, which again, a person who may be musically able and he's fluent in the Hebrew, in reading Hebrew, but the meaning is beyond his understanding, will be harder. Whereas if he understands the meaning through having read the translation, it may be easier for him to perform effectively at the time as well. So that's a pragmatic reason, which again is not really applicable nowadays for the most part, because when a man is called to the Torah, he just has to say the blessings, and we have a designated reader to serve as the Baal Kriya. The third reason is probably the most, I suppose, intuitively obvious one, so that people will be fluent in the verses of the Torah, so that they'll be on our lips regularly. And a person who does fulfill this practice, he reviews the Torah reading twice in the Hebrew, once in a translation, and then of course he goes to shul as well and he hears it from the reader again. So over time, the words of the Torah become very familiar to him and they become fluent, and it's a way of preparing, that is to say, keeping in step with the study of the Torah. When we hear the Torah every Shabbos, we may hear some explanations along the way. Hopefully we do if we come to Kesher. But the engagement in the process of reviewing it, studying it, looking for new insights, of course, that gives it greater meaning and greater vitality. So those may be the three reasons for it. Let's talk about the proper method for performing the mitzvah. As we shall see, there are a number of possibilities, and the good news is that any of them are valid. That's what the poskim say, that any of these options is acceptable, and we do find different great rabbis who had a preference for one or a different approach. And they're all valid. So one approach is to read a verse in Hebrew, to read it a second time in Hebrew, to read it a third time in translation, and then go on to the next verse. So verse by verse, he reads it that way. That's one approach. Another approach is to read each paragraph in Hebrew, the second time in Hebrew, and the third time in Aramaic. So it's like bite-sized chunks. Now, sometimes those paragraphs are quite long. They may extend for sometimes actually the entire Sedra is a single paragraph. There are some cases like that, but basically it's section by section is another option. So verse by verse, section by section. What I personally do is, mostly because I just find it the most convenient, I read the whole parsha in Hebrew once, I read the whole parsha in Hebrew a second time, and I read the whole parsha in Hebrew, in the Aramaic. Now, I have to admit, and I was pleased years ago to find that certain great rabbis have the same practice as well, that often what I do is I read it in Hebrew once, I read it in Aramaic once, and then the second reading in the original Hebrew, I rely on what I hear from the Baal Kriya on Shabbos. So although I said classically, and probably this may be the more common practice, a person would read it twice in Hebrew, once in Aramaic, and then go to shul and hear it again a further time. But it's also acceptable for a person to read it, as I say, once in Hebrew, once in Aramaic, and then the third time he can rely on what he hears from the Baal Kriya. Some say he's got to read it from his chumash along with the reader. Others say it's enough if he has in mind. If he listens closely, then that fulfills the mitzvah of the Shnai Mikra. And as I already said, the poskim say that any of these options are acceptable, and you can mix and match as well. In fact, a person, as in the example I just gave, even though the sort of presumptive preference is to read the original Hebrew once, original Hebrew twice, and then the translation, but one can also reverse the order to read the Hebrew once, then the Aramaic, and then the Hebrew again. what's the best time for this mitzvah? So can a person say, you know what, on lockdown, I've got lots of time. I'm going to read the next few parshas till the end of July, and then I don't have to deal with it anymore. No, it doesn't work that way. As I said at the very beginning, a person has to keep the pace with the congregation. So next week, we're going to read Parshas Naso. So during those days, he should read Parshas Naso, and similarly Behaloscha after that, week by week. What's the earliest time that he can begin? So I like this, especially during the summertime, and you'll see why in one moment. The earliest time to begin is the time when we begin to read the following week's Torah portion. When is that? When do we begin to read the following week's Torah portion? On Shabbos, right? Shabbos afternoon. So Shabbos morning, we read the Parsha of the week. But when we get to Mincha, we read the first part of the following week's Sedra, and again Monday, and again Thursday. So the halacha is that from the time of Mincha, which would be nowadays about 1:45 p.m., on Shabbos, a person can read the Parsha for the following week. And actually, that's what I like to do on Shabbos afternoon. I like to read the following week's Parsha. It also gets me in the right mood, helps me with my Torah preparation a little bit as well. And actually, I normally do it once then, but I could, in principle, I could do, the Shnai Mikra V'Chad Targum even on Shabbos afternoon. Some prefer the practice of reading it day by day of the week, like every morning or whatever time of the day, to read the Torah, the Aliyah, the Torah portion is divided into 7 aliyot, as we know. So again, each day of the week, a person could read a portion, or as we said, in other ways to divide it up also. So that's the earliest time. What about the latest time? That is to say, if you didn't finish reading the parsha during the week of that Torah reading, and now Shabbos has come and gone, is it too late? Well, it's not too late. It's preferable. Ideally, a person should complete this mitzvah by the time of the lunchtime meal. So again, on lockdown, you've got lots of time. You finish davening, whatever time, let's say 10 o'clock, 10:30, assuming you got out of bed before that, which may be not always an accurate assumption. And then you're going to eat at whatever time. So you can sit down and you can read the Parsha Shnai Mikra V'Chad Targum at that point. It's preferable to finish it before the lunchtime meal. That's considered the ideal, to finish it before the daytime meal. If not, you should try to finish it before Mincha. If not, you can finish it until Tuesday night, because until midweek, the days of the week are still considered to be basking in the aura of the Shabbos before. So even though, again, I keep talking about next week, we'll say it's going to be Parshas Naso, but the aura of the previous Shabbos still lingers. So one has until Tuesday night, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, is considered midweek, to finish the Torah reading, the Shnai Mikra V'Chad Targum for the Shabbos before. But for the real procrastinators, I've got good news. You can finish it until Simchas Torah. The problem is that if you fall too far behind, not like Rob, 3 days behind in 2.5 years, but if you fall, 2 months behind between now and Simchas Torah, you have a very busy Simchas Torah catching up with all that. But technically, one could even wait until Simchas Torah, because that is the end of the whole cycle of reading the Torah, as we know, in the course of the year. Just to wrap up, because limited time allocations to each of us. What about the festival readings? So I kept saying Parshas Naso is next week. Well, what about this week? What about this coming Shabbos? So, of course, this coming Shabbos in the diaspora, not for Rob, but for the rest of us, is the second day Shavuot. And therefore, the Torah reading, which we would normally do in the sequence, which is Parshas Naso, we're not going to do. Parshas Naso is going to be the following week. So this week, today, tonight, tomorrow, should a person do Shnai Mikra V'Chad Targum for the Torah reading of this Shabbos, which is second day of Shavuot, or for that matter, the Torah reading for the first day of Shavuot, which is the dramatic giving of the Torah, the 10 Commandments. Should a person prepare that by reading Shnai Mikra V'Chad Targum? It's actually not very long. It's quite a short passage, dramatic passage. The answer, intuitively, I suppose, is, yeah, it's a great idea. But the halacha does not demand it. the halacha stipulates that it's the Shabbos Torah reading week by week and the progression through the entirety of the Torah that a person should keep the pace with. But the Torah reading for the festivals is not required. So I'm not saying don't bother. I'm not saying that, but it's not required. And I think the reason is that, again, we want to have the assurance that a person will read the entire Torah in the course of the year, Shnai Mikra V'Echad Targum. Because like the Torah reading for this coming Friday, first day of Shavuot, is the dramatic Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. So we have read that already earlier in the year in Parshas Yisro. So if a person did Shnai Mikra V'Echad Targum week by week, he would have already fulfilled the mitzvah of reading that passage. So we're going to read it additionally this coming Friday for Shavuos morning, but a person is not obligated to prepare for it in that way. Again, I'm sure it's meritorious to do so, but the stipulation doesn't demand that the reading at that time. Okay, many I'm sure are wondering, what if my Aramaic is a bit rusty? My proficiency with Aramaic doesn't quite keep pace with my proficiency in some other ancient languages, like Ugaritic or Sanskrit or something like that. So the answer you will be pleased to know is that many hold a person doesn't have to read the Aramaic if he doesn't understand the Aramaic. He can read it in English. An English translation or a translation into another language as well is also legitimate if it's an authentic translation. A translation like the King James or something like that would not be ideal because it has Christological and distortions in it. But a translation such as Art Scroll or any of the traditional authentic translations a person can certainly use. And again, I would say I can't tell you about myself, although for many years I've been doing the Aramaic. But when I first started a long time ago, I used to read the Living Torah translation of Aryeh Kaplan. I found it very worthwhile, very informative. It reads in a very fluent style. The Living Torah of Aryeh Kaplan is my favorite translation of the Torah. There are others which are also authentic and all of that, but the Aryeh Kaplan translation is very good. So I used to read it twice in the Hebrew and once with the Aryeh Kaplan translation. But I would say that whatever translation you're comfortable with, English translation, you can certainly use that. At a certain point, you may feel I'm ready to brave the Aramaic and see what I can gain from that as well. I'll just finish up by saying that the question of whether this is also applicable to women. Are women also included in this obligation or in this mitzvah? It seems that it's not obligatory for women. It's not to say that women are discouraged in any way. On the contrary, it would be a great idea, would be very rewarding. The same benefit that any of us get from reading the Torah, I'm sure our wives, our daughters would derive a similar benefit. But because it's connected to the obligation to hear the Torah reading publicly, so those who are not obligated in hearing the public Torah reading would also not be obligated in this mitzvah. I would say, though, that in the current circumstance where none of us have heard the public Torah reading for a long time, it would be especially worthwhile to fulfill the mitzvah of Shnai Mikra V'Echad Targum, or at least to do the Mikra once for sure, in order to still keep pace with the reading of the Torah that is part of the rhythm of Klal Yisrael and has been for many hundreds of years. So I'll just leave it with that, and I'll just to conclude by saying that as we celebrate Shavuot, so the receiving of the Torah, the giving of the Torah, it's a good opportunity maybe to gain or to undertake to try to fulfill this mitzvah. And by the way, if your Hebrew reading is not that fluent yet, you struggle with the Hebrew, I would say read some of it in Hebrew, even if it's just to practice your Hebrew reading a bit, and read the rest in English. Even if you do it once, it still is a very worthwhile enterprise, and especially since we don't have the brilliant insights of Or HaChaim to accompany us during the Torah reading like we have done up until the middle of March. So this is our chance for each of us, myself included, to still study the Torah, read the Torah, enjoy the Torah, keep pace with the rhythm of Klal Yisrael throughout the generations stretching back to Har Sinai. So thank you very much, and I wish everyone Chag Sameach. And by now, I'm sure all of our upcoming speakers are here and ready to go. Ruthie, you were one of them, but I think probably we'll let Jeremy take the stage in between. Too many Simons all at once. Simon overload. Excuse Rob. I'm sorry, Rob. Did you ask something?
He was
okay.
there.
Yeah. Did we lose him?
Go ahead, Jeremy.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I wanted to speak tonight about one link that I found interesting between Parasha Kedoshim and Shavuot. Parasha Kedoshim is a very important parasha, not only because this is my Bar Mitzvah parasha, but also because it contains one of the very, very important principles of Judaism, which is that you should love others like yourself. I think it was roughly 2 months ago that Parasha Kedoshim was due to be read. And if I read Parasha, I tried to read the comments made by Rabbi Jonathan Sandler. As you may remember from last year, Rabbi Jonathan Sandler was killed in 2012 with his 2 kids by a terrorist. And for 2 years, he used to make comments of the Parasha. And his family, that I know because they're from Versailles, has made a compilation of his comments to Parasha in a book. And so I tried to relive his memory here, because as it is mentioned every week in the ALTC, may be gone but not forgotten. In his comment to Parasha Kedoshim, Rabbi Jonathan Sandler starts with a very famous story about one man that wanted to that met Shammai and asked to he converted him to Judaism while he's standing on 1 foot. And of course, Shammai asked him to go away. The same man met Leil, who on the contrary accepts that and teach him, don't do to others what you don't want others to do to you. This is the essence of Torah. The rest is comments, go and learn it. And he converts the man to Judaism. And Rabbi Sandler mentions the fact that why Leil has accepted to convert this man that at first look doesn't seem to be very committed to his learning of Torah. Why he has not acted like Shammai. And he mentioned that this was one of the difference between Leil and Shammai. Leil wanted to have as much students as possible, whereas on the contrary, Shammai was very focused on having as a limited number of students. He wanted the best, the elite of the students, just to ensure that they were not only have the integrity, the necessary integrity, but also the capacity to fully understand all the Torah and the principles and rights. And he wanted to ensure that they were then able to carry on and transfer all the content correctly. However, Leil was more was dedicated to have as much as possible students, because for him it was very important that as much as people learn Torah and teach the Torah to others Jews. And what Rabbi Jonathan Sandler mentioned is the fact that such approaches are not opposed, but on the contrary, they are complementary. And they are necessary in order to have a fully transmission of the Torah, and even today. And I think that we have here a link with Shavuot, and because on Shavuot we live the moment where the Jewish people receive the Torah, and we study Torah all night to commemorate that. And what we're doing, especially at Kesha, is the fact that we not only we have Rabbi Simon and Lucy Simon who are speaking, but also any other member of the Kesha community who is willing to talk. And therefore, here tonight and at every Shavuot, we have experts that speak, but also non-experts. I will not tell who is expert or who is not an expert. Even I can say that I'm definitely not one. But I think that that was interesting that there is a link between what we are doing tonight and what we learned from Parasha Kedoshim and all the Torah should be learned and teach. And that was all.
Shkach. Very nice, Jeremy. Thank you. Good. Okay, I think we were going to go to Ruthie.
Yeah.
What time was Mariv, Carl?
We're going to do Ruthie, Lisa, Mariv.
Okay. Great. Ruthie, take it away. I think your mute is on though.
I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I actually had prepared something that I see. Actually, I'm going to send you as a link for something to view instead, that somebody did something quite similar. But I'm going to bring the idea of that, and then I'm going to have a special Devar Torah. I see we have 2 birthdays. Jeremy, it's his birthday, and we got a message from the spiritual warrior yesterday that it was just his birthday this week also. So I told David that I have a Devar Torah for him. So I'm going to give a Devar Torah, but first I just want to mention an idea for us to be aware of on Shavuos. It's quite, whenever we go from Yom Tov to Yom Tov, we're traveling not on a horizontal timeline, as many people have heard expressed before, but it's a spiral of time. And whenever we get to the place in the timeline, we're visiting something and a theme that went through history. So we know that with Pesach, right? Avadim Hayinu. We talk in Hanukkah, we talk about it happened in those days, so it happens in our days. In Pesach, we reenact. And every Yom Tov that we go to, we're traveling to a place in time. And the word that's used for holiday is moed. Moed actually is translated as festival, but it really means a meeting place. And it's a place that we meet in order to be present in something that is happening throughout time, that reenacts itself throughout time. And each of the holidays has, in a sense, we go to that meeting place, we gather, there's a landscape. We know the landscape, Pesach, matzah, wine, no guests this year. We have a certain landscape. We have a landscape for Hanukkah. We have a landscape for Sukkot, for Sukkot, all the different mitzvos that revolve around that. But Shavuot actually has no landscape. It is totally barren. There are no mitzvos that are specific to Shavuos. Tons of customs, tons of minhagim. It's not a mitzvah to eat cheesecake. It's a custom to have dairy. I hope I'm not bursting anybody's bubble there. But it is an opportunity to actually, there's a reason that Shavuos is a barren landscape, and there are no specific mitzvahs. There's a custom to read the book of Ruth. There's a custom to decorate our homes in shul and greenery and flowers. What other customs do we have? What did I forget?
Tikkun Leil Shavuos.
Oh, right, staying up all night and learning. Right, so there are lots and lots of customs, but no mitzvahs for Shavuos. And that's on purpose. Shavuos needs to be a barren landscape because that is what there is. It is Torah. And the way that and Torah can't have a measurement like a mitzvah. It is just something that we can imbibe and involve ourselves and make it into Torat Chaim, a living Torah, an entity. So it's quite interesting to think about how Shavuos doesn't actually have its own mitzvahs. It has all the mitzvahs, of course, of Yom Tov, but nothing specific to it. But here's my Devar Torah for David. And he always likes to say, are you there, David? Spiritual warrior, I don't want to embarrass you. Maybe yes, maybe no. He's meditating. Okay. But he often will say, oh, Yetz Sahara, Yetz Sahara. Right? Has anyone ever heard that? Or maybe we say to ourselves, oh, Yetz Sahara, better beware of that Yetz there. So I've been looking into a definition for what Yetz Sahara means. And it's very different than we think of it, because often we think of the evil inclination as, I don't know, like a little somebody with a pitchfork sitting on our shoulder, or it's somebody who's trying to get us not to, trying to, I don't know, maybe it's the voice of our mother, or it's the school teacher telling us, don't do this, don't do this. But what is it? What does it really mean? So we can see how we can define Yetz Hara by looking for it. Was your Yetzirah getting to you there? Are you back on there, spiritual?
I'm about to breakfast.
I didn't hear that.
Sorry.
Okay, so we're finding what the Yetzirah is. So the Yetzer means form, right? F-O-R-M. When something is formed, when something is created, when something is made. And the word Ra can be translated as bad or evil, but Ra really means broken. Like on Rosh Hashanah, when we blow the shofar, one of the sounds that we make is truah, and that's a da 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 da. That's a broken sound, right? The word ra means something that is broken. So the idea of yotzer or yetzer is yetzer meaning to form. Yotzer means to form, to take the material and make it into a form. So the Yetzer Hara is actually an energy used to build something that does not work. It's wasted energy, which is an investment into something that doesn't achieve its purpose. It's unsuitable for its purpose. It's an initiative that breaks and harms us. So I'm kind of having a mind shift of how I look at my Yetzer Hara, and it's not something, it's really kind of like putting wasted energy into something that's just not going to work. And not only is it not going to work, but it's going to ultimately harm me, my Yetzer Tov, because that's what we all are in essence, a Yetzer Tov. Tov meaning good, Tov implying that we are God-like. God is good. So, so just a little bit of a mind shift of how we can look at the concept of Yetzer Hara, not as something sitting on our shoulder, but rather something that is kind of breaking a shattered spirit that's non-functional. It's not gonna. It's putting our energy and wasting our time into trying to accomplish something that either isn't going to work or is going to ruin what we really want to accomplish. So that's my idea for. So we can eat our cheesecake on Shavuot if we're doing it for the custom and to enhance Yom Tov. But if it's going to break our goal, then it's going to be working against us. All of our goals.
Yeah, thank you.
You need to set a goal of eating cheesecake, and then it won't break your goal.
Yeah, that could be. Is that a good goal? It could be. It could be.
Great. Next up, we have Lisa. Hey, Lisa.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Lisa.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lisa, and I work for the Jewish Deaf Association, or JDA, as we like to call it. And I've chosen my topic, Daily Inspiration, to talk about my job and how I came to be there. And I hope it brings some inspiration to anyone going through challenging times. I first started working for the JDA back in 2012 after I was made redundant from my job in the city. I worked for a big financial firm, and it was a particularly dark time in my life. I'd lost my mom a few months earlier. My relationship was falling apart, and then I lost my job. So as you can imagine, I was devastated. But then it led me to my current job, which I've had ever since. I started working there as a temp administrator, and I loved the place immediately, but I was determined to pursue my career in HR. And when my boss asked me to stay permanently, I originally declined, which I can't believe now. And after about a month, I realized I was being crazy. I actually enjoyed going to work every day. And I said, okay, I'll become permanent. And I haven't looked back ever since. Over the years, I've completed 3.5 levels of sign language. There are only 4. And I've taken on many different roles, including arranging outings and 2 very challenging holidays. It's funny to think now that all the years ago as a madricha in Beitar, South Africa, I learned all the skills I would need to lead a group of deaf people to various destinations. I've now been working as a support worker in our support team for many years. All of our clients are deaf from birth and use sign language as their main form of communication. We support all our deaf and deaf-blind clients through every aspect of their lives. I consider it a great privilege that I get to fully communicate with people that so few others actually get to know. It's a very demanding and heart-wrenching job, but it is very, very rewarding. There are times of complete and utter stress when I fail to help my deaf-blind client with his very complicated Braille software and then have to leave him with no communication for the weekend. It takes my guts out. But there are many incredible things. With the blessing of my boss, I made a dying man's wish come true, and I took him back to his birth town, Manchester, to watch his beloved Manchester United play a match.
Wow.
And I told him at the time, your name might be Harry Newman, but I think you're the oldest person in this whole stadium, which I'm pretty sure he was.
Wow.
I've titled my talk Daily Inspiration because that's what I have every day. I'm inspired by my clients who battle through with their disabilities every day. I'm inspired by my boss who has an inspiring vision. She treats us with kindness and makes us feel valued and appreciated. And I'm inspired by my incredible colleagues who are everyday angels and make the world a better place in all they do, and the work family that we have created together. It's more than a job, it's the most fulfilling thing I've done with my life. That's me.
Amazing.
Hands everyone.
Thank you. Very good. Okay. Are we 9 o'clock? Are we? Do you want to?
Should we take a break for Marav now?
Yeah, we're going to do Marav now.
Yeah. Okay.
When do we get back on? For those of
Yeah.
No, if
Is it too early, Rabbi Simon, to do Marav?
We can't, in terms of the timing of our program tonight, if we want to break it up, then now's a good time. In terms of the nightfall, so we'd have to wait till pretty much, till about 10, which, we can do. It depends.
Why don't we
on
just stretch and then continue? Because some of us would rather go to bed earlier.
Well, then we should do Marav now. Then I think, and then
When should we come back? If we.
Should we
10
say?
minutes.
Yeah, 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Great.
Okay.
Super.
All right.
Don't forget to come back.
Cole, you pause the recording.
Rebbitzin, you can dive in Marav.
UK now. So nice.
Well, we've got Rob. Unless he's.
I'm representing you here up north. So nice to see everyone. So basically, I'm going to speak about. The title is My Take on Chesed Shel Emet. Everyone knows, I guess, the Chevra Kadisha that you have in every congregation. You have a burial. My English is not good enough. Burial society. So you have a group of people that deal with the deceased in every community. They do everything that has to do with the deceased, and their motto is Chevra Kadisha Chesed Shel Emet, that they do a true act of kindness. So you could ask, why are other acts of kindness, like giving money to the poor, for example, why isn't that called Chesed Shel Emet? Why is that just Chesed? The explanation is that the benefactor of the act will never be able to pay you back. In other words, you're doing something without any chance of reciprocity, any chance of, sort of having an interest in the act. So that's why it's called Chevra Kadisha. Now, in general, I think human beings, even the most disadvantaged human beings, can usually understand with the help of their intellect how society works. I know I'm saying something very general, but if we take, for example, during the Holocaust, you had people, my neighbor in Hendon, her father fled at the age of 16 from Poland to Siberia, and he started cutting trees for a living, and he somehow made it through the war and then went to Israel and survived and had a family. What I want to say is that most human beings, they can sort of, with the help of their intellect and their skills and other things, they can find a way to survive, usually. Now, if we go back to Chesed Emet, what act of kindness can you do where the benefactor cannot pay you back, but is actually alive? So I'll just give you a few seconds there to think about that. Who can you help who is alive, but can never pay you back in all cases?
Parents?
The answer to that I find to be animals. If a certain species of animal is threatened with mass extinction due to what we as humans do, they can never plead their cause and they can never save themselves. So in the Bible, we're told that God told us that we would rule over animals. And in my, understanding of that whole, section of the Bible is that God told us to be custodians of the earth and all living beings in it, but not just act selfishly for our own good. We're taking care of the world that belongs to God, but we do so in taking care of the world that God gave us. And I think that selfishness at the level, we all understand that selfishness at the level of the individual is not a good thing, but somehow it's hard for a lot of people to understand that selfishness on the level of a people, for example, or a whole species is not good. But I think that we need to really get away from just thinking about the human species, but also think about the whole world. So the work to help animals for me is a case of chesed shel emet, par excellence. There's actually, I don't think, any better example of chesed shel emet, because animals are truly voiceless. They're living at our mercy in a world controlled by us, and we set the rules. So animals are living in the world under our conditions. And there's a lot of cruelty to animals, as you all know, taking place in the world every day. And I'm not going to even go into that in detail, but the current pandemic was actually caused by a fair in sort of an open air market in Wuhan, China, where they trade in exotic animals, where animals which shouldn't be in a market, they should be, living in the wild. So I think you can draw a lot of conclusions from Corona, but one is that Tsar Ba'alei Chaim, being cruel to animals, we finally get to pay the price for it. It's not often we pay the price for that sin, but I think this time we got divine punishment for it. And it's a punishment which is a correction. It's not revenge, but it's something we're supposed to learn from. So my drasha this year ends with an exhortation that we as Jews this year until next Shavuot at least do some chesed shel emet when it comes to this issue, and at least try to help some animal or some group of animals from suffering. There are organizations that you can donate to and that try to help animals in all sorts of different situations. God, animals are God's beautiful creations, and they of course deserve much better than they have got through history and are getting from us now. I just want to end on a positive note that I think the one good thing from the coronavirus as well has been that we let the earth rest. During Shnat Shmitah in Eretz Israel, every 7 years we don't plow the land, we don't work the land, we let it rest. And you can see now during Corona that pollution is down, and a lot of we're letting the wildlife, it's coming back to Jerusalem, for example. A lot of animals are doing much better. So we're currently overusing the Earth's resources year by year at an alarming rate. We're causing global warming, and it seems that Hashem has finally forced us to take a break from that. So I just want to end with a blessing that may God bless us and all animals with much health and happiness until next Shavuot.
Amen.
Oh, yeah, beautiful. And just to say, for those that don't know, Tobias is with us tonight, not from Hendon to the north, but from Sweden to the north.
Good effort.
One of the interesting things, maybe about this disease and everything it's on it, is that it is kind of the great equalizer in very strange and unexpected ways. And I was just thinking of Tobias being up there, sort of marooned temporarily in Sweden. I used to have to travel up to Sweden and the Nordic region for work. And I would often, because of the short Fridays, get stuck there for Shabbos. And getting stuck anywhere on your own in like a Novotel or any hotel is really a kind of unpleasant thing, even if you just try and sort of sleep through it all. And, the thing, just going back to this disease and how we are now, is that it is a great equalizer in a sense, because we're all marooned, albeit at home or even in strange places. But in a sense, it doesn't matter where you are physically, because we are all equally unconnected and connected to each other. So just on behalf of everyone, Tobias, just wishing you Hag Sameach for Shavuot and for your time there. We look forward to having you back here with us soon, and you're always connected.
Thank you.
Yeah, Hag Sameach.
Next up, we have Yaakov Schmidt, if he's on the line.
Give me a second. I thought Philip would be before me.
Yes, for good reason. Philip is Philip's daughter. Emma gave birth to a baby girl this morning, so Philip is babysitting for his other granddaughter, and may sort of join us later as time, a situation.
So should I do it now? You want me to speak now?
Sure.
Okay, just give me 1 second.
If you're ready, or you can.
No, just give me. I just need just 1 second. Yeah, and then I'm with us here.
Okay.
Just need to.
Mr. Schenken, since you're an expert, can you just tell us how you screen share while we're waiting for Yaakov? If anybody, I might have something I want to screen share. How does it work?
So I'll practice from my own one, yeah? So this is one of the things that, the host has disabled attendee screen sharing. So
just as well we test it.
Enable.
Okay, we'll have to see how that works if we.
Can I just say something? We would love to get photographs of how anything you've made that looks yummy for Shavuos, or if you've decorated your homes, or if you bought your wives or husbands flowers for Yom Tov, take a picture, send it in, and we'll post it. We can even make it open chat. I'll make the Kesher group, if people don't get off of it, we'll make it open tomorrow, okay?
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Get creative.
Okay. All right.
I'm almost done. Just 1 second. Yeah, go ahead.
And just to be clear, Paul, I'm absolutely not an expert, because this exact problem was one of the problems we had on Sunday. I would have liked to have known how to turn off attendee screen sharing, but did not know.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Carl, you'll figure it out. Or you're on mute. I don't know.
I've passed you the host now, Paul. So you can.
I'll figure it out. Okay.
You can share, or you can give it to Stephen to share if you.
Pass it to Stephen. Now you're talking.
I think we've got to go into the actual settings of the meeting. I'll look at it. But it's not essential.
What are you trying to do? Because I had a whole tutorial on Zoom.
Screen sharing.
Oh, there we go. I think I've done it. Okay, try it, Steve.
Okay, I'm going to try now here.
Oh, yeah.
So, this is a diagram I'm going to share, so you can see that. You want to see that diagram?
Yeah, well done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
that works. So you just click. Okay, so
you click screen share, and then where's the other one? Wow, I've got so much junk open.
Okay, so it's just
yeah. Can you see that one? No, it's a different one, isn't it? You see like color?
Yeah, we can see it. Yeah, we see it.
Colorful pattern, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Fine. So Paul, do you want to try yours now? So you click screen share, and then it presents you with the windows that you've got on your computer.
1 second. Okay, let me just. Okay. So let's just see. So.
Can I also say, so when you screen share, you can go to new screen, so you don't have to go out of the screen sharing mode. You can, once you press screen share, you can press new share. You can just go to the next slide.
Okay, so that's up. Like I just went to a web page.
Yeah, good.
Oh, fine. Okay, and then you go stop share. Okay, got you. Okay. Yaakov, whenever, otherwise.
I'm right. Yeah,
yeah, you want to go for it? Okay, I'm ready for you.
Start now. Okay, good. So let me just see here 1 second. Yeah, the computer's a bit slow. Welcome and good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak. My talk tonight is entitled From Shir HaShirim to Shiron, or to Shira Mizrachit, and I call it subtitle A Tour d'Horizon. That's an homage to Jeremy and our French community. A tour d'horizon on Jewish songs in Israeli music. We had earlier from Gina about the eyes, how important the eyes is. So I want to speak about the ears, about the listening, which are the songs. So I want to speak a little bit about the Shir HaShirim, which I reviewed in the last year, and then a new column that I started, which I called Shiron, which is about music, and then about a few things in between, and hopefully I can give you some pleasure for your ears. Okay, so Jews like music. Rabbi and Chazan Leil Rosenfeld, who was my rabbi and is my rabbi at Western Marble Arch Synagogue, because I like many synagogues, so I have several rabbis, even though Rabbi Rashi is my favorite rabbi, I have to say. And it's not to schmooze him. He's an excellent Shaliach Tzibur, Leil Rosenfeld, whether he sings alone or with the choir on Yom Kippur with the former Chief Rabbi Lord Sachs. That's an amazing experience. In the past, he also sang with my children, and he was a teacher to my son. So music I think it's very essential, even though I'm very bad at music. I'm very good at listening to music, but I'm not very good at making music. My sons and other parts of the family are very good in playing music or singing and song. Then there are other people who play beautiful music, such as Shmuel Barzilai, who is the Oberkantor in Vienna, a very famous Chazan in Vienna at the main synagogue. And then Moshe Dubina, the former cantor of the Western Synagogue, and Ari Cohen, and Shlomo, the late Shlomo Karlebach, and of course, Yossele Rosenblatt, who was a famous Chazan, as you know, in the beginning of the late 19th, beginning of the 20th century. I think he passed away in the mid-30s. And then, of course, Joseph Schmidt. Unfortunately, I'm not related to him, but he was a very short but very powerful man with a powerful voice, and he sang beautiful songs. Unfortunately, he left Chazanut, and then he went into singing, and he even sang in Tel Aviv in the 1930s. Quite an amazing person that he traveled from Austria and then Switzerland to Israel and so on. And then today, we have the stars of today: Yishai Ribo, Eviatar Banai, Eyal Golan, Eden Chazon, Eden Ben Zaken, and many, many others who I like, and perhaps I introduced them to you in the last few months with my Shiron column. Okay, so I want to kick off here, just a little thing for the ear. Just give me 1 second. So we're going to listen to my Yiddish Mame from, hang on a second here, from Yossele Rosenblatt. If you know him, Yossele Rosenblatt was a famous Chazan, but he also sang songs, not like Joseph Schmidt in the popular world, more like on the side. Let me just see whether this works here. It's a bit slower. Let's see here. So while we're waiting for Yossele and for YouTube, okay, I continue here, and I'm talking quickly about Shir Shlomo. Shir Shlomo was a column that I started at the end of after Sukkot, and I reviewed Shir HaShirim in the last year, as you might know, which was my weekly discussion of Shlomo HaMelech's love song Shir HaShirim, which was the third in a series of reviews of major pieces of work of Shlomo HaMelech. The first was Kohelet, which I reviewed 3 years ago, and then Mishle last year, and this year I did Shir HaShirim. And I felt that I should review it because it's part of this cycle of understanding Shlomo HaMelech, but also it's obviously a beautiful, beautiful text that Mizrahim and Sephardim read every Friday afternoon before Shabbat, before Kabbalat Shabbat. And when we were in Morocco, we actually had the pleasure of listening to it in Marrakesh. I remember quite vividly, which was very beautiful. So Shir HaShirim is a beautiful song, but the question is, what is it? Is it a song, or is it music? Is it a poem? Is it literature? I think it's many things. And obviously we can lane it, and we lane it in Shul on Shabbat Chol HaMoed of Pesach, which this year unfortunately we couldn't, but usually that is, and that's why I wanted to finish Shir HaShirim by Pesach, because I wanted to finish it. So in a way, this is almost like a little siyum for Shir HaShirim, which I've finished reviewing a few weeks ago. Okay, so I tried to understand Shir HaShirim in the last 5-6 months, and it's very difficult. It's like all the texts by Shlomo HaMelech. It's a difficult text, but this is an extremely difficult text because it jumps all the time, as you know, between Hashem, the Jewish people, and third parties in the dialogue. It's also difficult because it uses the language of love for a relationship between Hashem and the Jewish people, and there are different ways of interpreting or seeing it and understanding it, whether it's the relation between the Jewish people and Hashem or between a woman and her husband who left her because she wasn't faithful, or perhaps a combination of that. And I discussed it, and it's obviously it's a beautiful thing to listen to that. So here is Yosele. I'm trying to find Yosele. He's on the screen, but he doesn't want to sing. Perhaps I upset him. I don't know. So we continue with, so Yosele unfortunately doesn't want to sing here for me, which is a pity because I had planned it. And as you know, here with the new technology, it's all supposed to work, but then sometimes it doesn't go exactly the way we have it. But that doesn't matter. Perhaps we do it here. I had planned initially to do this to incorporate it in this.
Well done.
I don't know whether you can hear it. He's in the background.
Yeah, we can hear
Here
it.
he comes. I just want you to hear because we're going to hear some other things later. So this is the Yiddish Mame, and I wanted us to listen to it because obviously music is beautiful. It's good for the soul. It's for the ear. We can also see him here on YouTube because now with YouTube, we have the beauty of not just hearing, but also seeing things and these old videos. It's a Yiddish that some of us understand, and even if you don't understand, you can hear the power of it. But we can going to hear some other music in a short while, which is then the new music. So this is the kind of traditional music 100 years ago, 150 years ago, before the internet and before all of the other things that we had in place. So, Shir HaShirim, I love Shir HaShirim, lots of things to be said, but we want to move on, and I come back to Shir HaShirim in a second. So, so music, where do we start with music? Okay, we start with music, of course, in the morning with Shacharit. Okay, in Shacharit, in Psukei de Zimra, which our Chazan, morning Chazan, Paul says very beautifully every morning. Okay, in Psalm 146, Azamra, I will make music. Psalm 147, Kitov Zamra, for it is good to make music to our God. And then in 149, Shirul Hashem, sing to Hashem. In 150, Betekia Shofar, Betziltzeli Shama, Betziltzeli Trois. You know all the words, but they are very powerful. It's all about music. It's all about singing in music. So with the clanging cymbals and resonating trumpets, I just love it. I think if you listen to and understand the words and read them and then sing and pray them in the morning, it is just beautiful. In my view, music opens the soul, and it says Psalm 150 finishes, as you know, Kol haneshama tehalel Yah, let all souls praise Hashem. I think it's just powerful. After that is, comes Shirat Hayam, the song by the sea, an expression of joy when Moshe and the Jewish people leave Mitzrayim and go through the Sea of Reed. And here my son Gidi learned it beautifully on his bar mitzvah, and sometimes when he comes back on the anniversary, and sometimes on Pesach when he learns it. So that's beautiful for me in a personal capacity. So we have lots of quotations and references to music in the Tefillah, but it's not just in the Tefillah. So as we said earlier, Shir HaShirim is read on Shabbat and Chol HaMoed, and I found a beautiful video of a Chazan who sings Shir HaShirim or Leil Shir HaShirim with a video of the Kvarim of Morocco. And one of the kever is the kever of Rabbi Shlomo Ben Hedge, who's the kever we visited on the occasion of the Kesher trip organized by our rabbi and the rabbis, which was an amazing experience. So that is a beautiful video. I don't know, we don't have enough time to listen to it, but it's beautiful, beautiful laning, and that is the traditional kind of songs, okay? And then I found on the internet there are some people who sing Shir Shirim beautifully in a classic way. This is a beautiful song. So Shir Shirim is obviously a song, is a poem, it's philosophy, it's many things, okay? And I think we have to put it into perspective with Kohelet and Mishle as something that is joyful, that he probably wrote at the beginning, Shlomo HaMelech when he was young, and Mishle when he was in his prime time, and Kohelet when he was older and wiser and perhaps more cynical. Even so, some people say it was the other way around, so we are not quite sure about that. I learned it definitely the other way around. I learned first Kohelet, which was really difficult and cynical, and at the end I learned the beautiful, or studied the beautiful Shir Shirim. So that is really about Shir Shirim, and there's lots of things to be said. I just want to finish my short expose on Shir Shirim with chapter 8, verse 14, which is the end, which is a beautiful finish where it says, Israel says to Hashem, Brachtudi, flee my beloved. So that is the yearning of the Jewish people to be united with Hashem. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful term, and as you know, it is this term Dodi, the beloved, which we also use for our chasanes when we get married. Ani li dodi v'dodi li, as an expression of love between a husband and a wife. Okay, so now just a few words about Shiron and the Israeli music. Okay, so I started a few months ago this idea of reviewing Israeli music. As you know, I'm hooked on Israeli music, in particular Mizrahi music. Many years ago, 30 years ago, I liked Shlomo Artzi and Arik Einstein and Nurit Galron and all the people of the 70s and 80s. But as I want to stay young, I moved on, and I got acquainted with the new singers, and they are beautiful. Okay, most of them are Mizrahim, and they combine Mizrahi music and Mizrahi tunes with Arabic, Persian, French, Spanish. Most of them are Mizrahim, but some others are also Ashkenazim, or as some are also Ashkefazim, which is half-half. And they're all good looking, and they're all lively, and for me, they are the sign of the new Israel. Okay, but there are some of them are actually not just good looking and do good music. Some of them are even from. Okay, and I want to present two of them to you. One is a gentleman who is called Eviatar Banai. Okay, who was a singer in the 1990s, and I think 10, 15 years ago, he became from. He now walks around with kippah and there's a very kippah and tzitzit. And he sings a beautiful song that I want to play to you here quickly, because I think it's also not just a beautiful song, but it also is quite topical for our times of social distancing. Okay, and the song is called Matai Nitnashek, When Will We Kiss? So let me just play it to you, because it's a beautiful song. That was before he was from. So he composed the song in the 1990s, but now he is actually a from boy and he sings beautiful song. But I thought this is a beautiful song where he sings about when will we kiss again? I bring you flowers, I bring you something to drink. I love you so much, I want to kiss you again. I think it's just a beautiful song that perhaps is something that we kind of are yearning ourselves these days. When can I hug again my children? I haven't hugged my children for 2 or 3 months. When can I hug them again? When can I kiss again somebody I haven't kissed, my mother or my somebody I would like to kiss or hug. And I want to finish with a beautiful song by a singer called Yishai Ribo, which some of you might know. He became very popular most recently with a song on Corona, which is called Keta Melucha. Okay, and in this song, which he sings, he starts off the song. I don't know if you know them. The rabbi smiles. I think he knows the song because it starts in the first few verses. He uses the names of the parashiot. He says Tetzaveh, Naso, and so forth and so on. And then there's a beautiful pizmon, beautiful chorus where he says, "Uma ata rotze shenavin mizeh, איך מתקרבים, איך מתרחקים, איך מתקרבים בכאב הזה, רוצה לחיות איתך, לא להיות לבד." What you want us to understand from this, which is the coronavirus, how do we distance ourselves and draw near in this pain? We want to live with you and not to be alone. And now I want to play this song to you. You might have seen it, and if you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend it. Okay, it's not just a beautiful song, but it's also a beautiful video.
בין תצווה כי תישא אסתר פורים בשתי שמחה מי יחנה ומי יישא בתוצאה בין כי תישא לבד כל עולם מפסיק להתקרב להשתתק להסתגר ישמעאל לדורי ישראל בין ויקל לפקודי נשבעים ובשדה כבר אין מול מי להתנהל מגדל בבל שוב מתבלבל.
Another chorus.
מה אתה רוצה שנבין מזה? איך מתרחקים ומתקרבים בכאב הזה? רוצה לחיות אותך ולא להיות לבד. מה אתה רוצה שנלמד מזה? ואיך נדע להתאחד בפירוד הזה? עד שניתן לך כתר מלוכה.
כתר מלוכה, coronavirus. So there we go. So what's the conclusion? Music is for the ears. Music is for the soul. Jews love music. I kicked off with that. And I think we need music perhaps more than ever in these times. And there are beautiful songs, whether it is from the Torah, the Tanakh, as we had earlier from our friend Rob, the power of the Tanakh, or whether it's Shir HaShirim, or whether it's poems of Piyutim that we sing, or whether it's just songs that somebody like Banai or Ribo compose, and we can listen to and we can enjoy. And with this, I wish all of us a Chag Shavuot Sameach, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Very nice.
Thank you. Yaakov, you weren't invited, so you weren't present at the spiritual spa that we had earlier this week. But we spoke about in the Women's Learning Group. We spoke about Tehillim, and it was very much on that tune that David HaMelech composed many of the Tehillim, and they were actually composed. They were actually written as songs from his soul. That's how he connected, which actually became the Tehillim prayers that we say today. And so the connection through song is so powerful. So, and those are the Tehillim that we recite today regularly and connect to Hashem with. So,
thank you very much. Yes, of course, you're right. I mean, I think the most famous one, of course, is Shira Ma'alot that we sing before many others. Yeah.
And it talks about one day we'll wake up as if it was just a dream. So we're waiting for this bad dream nightmare to be over so we can wake up and move on. But apparently, and they say every letter of the alphabet apparently is a different musical note or step in a note. So when the Tehillim were played, that was the music, which is quite a fascinating concept to think about.
Thank you.
And also doesn't the Gemara say that a wind would blow at night and it would play the harp strings, and that was King David's alarm clock, and he would get up at midnight and compose. That was his composing time and prayer time before he went to be the king.
Very good. In fact, the whole Torah is called a shira as well. The whole Torah is called a song. So Yaakov is absolutely correct that the music has a profound role in Jewish life and in the Torah itself. And as Gina says, that the Tehillim also are a song. But Yaakov mentioned that Kol Neshamata Hallel Hallelujah, with every breath to praise God. Right. Okay, excellent. It becomes very difficult to maintain this exalted standard of originality and creativity, but I have no doubt that our next speaker will adhere and even surpass that high bar. Okay, that's my intro to the intro.
Right.
Steve, your mute's on.
So, according to the schedule I saw, the next speaker was break. But I'll do my best to surpass break. So let's see what we can do. So good evening, everybody. Let's see if I can actually say something that's of some degree of interest. So those who have been to Tikkun Leil at Kesher before know that I tend to choose deeply complex Kabbalistic topic for a slot that is usually in the middle of the night. And the reason for that is because typically nobody's listening, so I can say what I like and nobody actually bothers to check all it.
You're being recorded this time.
So I'm feeling a little bit.
Your luck has run out, Stephen.
Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit exposed to scrutiny. The fact that it's 10 to 10. But let's see. So I have still chosen a deeply complex and Kabbalistic topic, but let's hope that I actually cover it with the correct information. So for those that remember last year, I talked about the concept of perspective and relativity, taken from my neighbor and friend Eli Katz's book, The Unity of Heaven and Earth, which was again based on the Nefesh Chaim Shari Gimel. For those who remember, I took photos of Uncle Moshe and talked about new Uncle Moshe and old Uncle Moshe. But this year, before Pesach, Eli wrote another article, which some of you may have read. It's in the Federation magazine Hama'or, and it is the start of his second book in this series of The Unity of Heaven and Earth. And this time, it describes how mathematics and numbers how mathematics and number reveal the deepest secrets of the universe, and through that help us to proclaim the oneness of God through, as we've said before, the unification of science and Torah. So who thinks it can fit all that into a 10-minute slot on Zoom? Right.
It's 9 minutes.
Yeah, as those that listen to my,
take your time.
Eat up my time with intros, so we're doing good. Right. So I'm not going to be able to explain everything to a good extent. However, as Shavuot is coming in, we've been counting Omer, and numbers are fully in our minds. This is why this is the topic I've chosen. So numbers and Shavuot are tightly linked. So hopefully the brief insight I'm going to give you now will pique your interest, and maybe if there's sufficient demand, we can maybe even get Eli himself to come and give us a bit more of a deeper insight. So here we go. So like most things in creation, maths and numbers has a spectrum of interest. Now, numbers and counting are obvious human inventions. We invented them to do basic things like trade and commerce and banking and all that. So humans created numbers because we needed to. And that then led to number theories and then pure mathematics. And that allows us to create symbols and formulae that allowed us to create applied mathematics, which allowed us to build like buildings and structures and all this amazing stuff. And then we did it out of necessity. And then we realized that we could use those same numbers to represent physical reality. Yeah, so we can create equations that through our observations could be represented through numbers. Things like the famous Einstein formula E equals mc squared. So that's really complex, and I don't know how many of you have lost, but that's the idea of the mathematic progression. Now, during my teenage years, I was struck by the beauty of some simple mathematical shapes called fractals. The one I showed earlier, I'll show it to you now. So a fractal is created in a really simple way, whereby you can, it's a very simple formula. You ask your computer to go and draw the same thing again and again and again. And it's a little bit like spirograph when we were kids. So I loved fractals, and here's an example of a fractal. And if you look at a fractal, for me, it conjured up images of nature, snowflakes, ferns, and as it happens, you can create fractals that look exactly like seashells, ferns, and snowflakes. Now, this, until recently, I always loved it, and it struck me as a perfect example of the traditional watchmaker proof of God's existence. You know, how can, if you stumble across something so complex and beautiful, how can it not have a creator? That's the very simple thing. But it wasn't until Ellie's article this year that I've actually come to realize the connection between the alphabet and numbers and creation. So a few very basic examples to try and move us on a little bit. So we call our Torah Chumash, which is 5. We call our Gemara Shas, which comes from the Shisha Sidre, which is 6 volumes. So inherently, alphabets are numbers. The numbers lead to number theory, which leads to applied maths, which describes our physical reality, which I've gone before. I know that's all a big, big leap. Trying to keep you all with me, but it's just so many of you know I have been trying to be a bit more diligent in my Daf Yomi, and a couple of weeks ago, I came across something I hadn't seen before. There was a gematria in the Gemara in Shabbat, on page 70. So we're 3 weeks ago now. Yeah. So I'd never seen a gematria in Gemara before. So I thought, oh, you know what? This must be quite common. As it happens, there are very few gematrias in the revealed Torah. So it's quite rare. So why is that? I still don't have an answer. But quite interestingly, if you look at the Sepharim of the hidden Torah, the Zohar, the Sefer Yetzirah, the works of the Vilna Gaon, the works of the Arizal, yeah, all of these Sepharim are filled with gematrias. So the question is, why are there so few in the revealed Torah, but they do exist, and why are there so many in the hidden Torah? So this is something that leads me to, through my research recently, to understand that the bridge between the hidden and the revealed actually lies through mathematics and numbers, and the art or the study of gematria is a part of that bridge. So there's a beautiful thing. So one of the most beautiful, complex, explicit gematrias in the Zohar is about pure numbers, and it's one of these really beautiful, complex gematrias. So the Zohar says that the sum of the sequence of the first 10 squares, so this is 1 squared plus 2 squared plus 3 squared plus 4 squared plus 5 squared plus 6 squared plus 7 squared plus 8 squared plus 9 squared plus 10 squared equals 385, which is also the gematria of the word Shekhinah. So the Zohar says that therefore the holy name relates to the descent of God's divine presence down into this world, and that's what the Shekhinah was. That was the cloud in the Beit HaMikdash. And this is one of the amazing gematrias, the explicit gematrias in the Zohar. Now, I've just gone through a really complex one. We're all kind of familiar. I think most of us are kind of familiar with the basic gematrias, Aleph 1, Bet 2. But through some of these deeper sources, there are many other types of gematrias that are going over. There's one called Miluim, which you may have heard of, which is where an Aleph is actually 111 because it uses the 3 letters of the Aleph to make up the value. There's Seraphim, which are combinations. There are factorials, 6 times 5 times, yeah. There are sums of the sequences. There are squares, which is the one I've just given you from the Zohar. There is the Mispar Katam, which I remember Rabbi Simon giving us recently, where you reduce each of the letters down to 1 digit. There's what they call atbash, letter exchanges. Lots and lots of different, more complex levels of gematria. Now, is this just a way of making things up? Well, clearly not. It's these are Sepharim and sources that have been around for a very long time, but it's very so. There's much to say. Where are we up to? So I think I've got a couple more minutes. So I'm just going to try and show how gematria, if this is directly from Ellie's article, where gematria sits in the way to link the hidden world and the revealed world. So let me just share you this diagram, which hopefully will cast some explanation on what I've been saying very badly. So there you go. Here's a little photo of the article from Hamaor. So if you can see, this is a diagram that Ellie produced. It tries to show the physical realm, which is the green at the bottom. This is physics and things we can see around us. Then we can see that is explained through pure mathematics and applied mathematics through the formulas. And then you have numbers and number theory. So this is the kind of the created world human side. Then we start to move across to the spiritual side, where the spiritual realms of Torah. And then you have the Aleph Bet and the Gematrias, which are, again, built up. So what I've hopefully tried to explain, or at least I've not explained at all, but hopefully I've piqued your interest in the idea that Gematrias are divine, and not only are they the divine, they are the mechanism through which the hidden world and the revealed world are connected. So the next time you hear an interesting gematria at a Sheva Bracha, you're actually looking at one of the most deep Kabbalistic inventions in this world. Hag Sameach, Yom Tov.
Very nice. Very nice.
Baruch. Thank you, Stephen.
So what's the famous Shavuot gematria with the name of Ruth? There's a famous gematria.
Can I just ask, can you write the name and title of that book, and just so we can look it up, Stephen?
Sure thing. The book currently doesn't exist, so that's the problem. It's currently being written. However, I will ask the author's permission.
יודוך עמים אלוהים יודוך עמים כולם ארץ נשנה יבולה יברכן אלוהים אלוהינו יברכן אלוהים וירוסו כל עשי ארץ על המקור כדולה שמנך תתיו צורך כמה נעשה וחסרנו נערינו נורא יחיד גיא עמך פני זוכה קדוש עשיך שבסנו קבל נשמת צגוסנו דיאתנו מספור שקבל חוסר ריבונו של עולם אתה ציווי שרה לי למשה עבדך ספירת העומר כדי לתארנו מקליפוסינו ומתום עושינו כמו שכסבת בסרצך וספרתם לכם ממחרס השבס ויום אביכם אז עומר התנופה שבע שבס עושים ממס תהיינה אני מחסה שבעשה שוויסטיס חמישים ימים כדי שיתרונה ושוס עמך איסא מזהו מסם וכן יעשו מנך אדוני אלוהינו ולהם עשינו שזכות ספרסם אשר ספרתי היום יסוכן מה שספרתי בספירה מלכוס שבמלכוס ויטהר ויסקדיש בקדושו של מעלה על ידי זה יושפע שפע רע בכל העולם נסכן את נשמתנו ורוחנו ונשמתנו מכל סיגוף וגם ולתארנו ולקדשנו בקדושתך העליונה. Amen. Selah. Okay, so we've completed the mitzvah of Sfiras HaOmer for the year. I always feel a certain twinge of not exactly sadness, but as if a mitzvah that I've been engaged in is no longer available for the next, I suppose, 10 and a half months approximately. So those who have been counting day by day, kol hakavod, 49 days, and we're now on the very threshold of Shavuot, which is an excellent intro to our final two speakers.
Can I just say something?
Sure.
I'm an hour late here, so with your permission, I'll have to excuse myself.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you for staying on. We'll send you the recording.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tobias. Thank you for joining us, and wish you Chag Sameach.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Okay, I think it's my turn. Yeah, so well done, Paul. It seemed like you had a lot more to say on the subject. So if you want to take my 5 minutes worth, you're very welcome.
Sorry, I ran over.
But, I think on that note, I think it's an appropriate time to say L'chaim. So to Paul and Carl also for putting this all together. I think it's amazing, like what Jeremy said earlier, it's amazing to see how the Kesher Kehillah can come together on all levels, talk Torah, which is the obligation that we have to do, and it's amazing that we've managed to achieve it even via Zoom. So kol hakavod for that.
Absolutely, kol hakavod, l'chaim, l'chaim.
I can see him.
So I'm just going to really speak for a very short while. I'm not as prepared as the other speakers, but I was listening to a talk via Zoom on a discussion about the coronavirus, and it was quoted from Vladimir Lenin, who is the founder of the Soviet Union. Now, it's most probably not the best person to quote, especially leading up to Shavuot, talking about the Soviet Union, but the quote read as follows. It said, there are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. And I thought about this, and I thought it was just a very profound quote or saying to relate to what's happening now during the coronavirus in the last few weeks. In the space of a few weeks, there have literally been decades that have happened. But I also think it relates very well to the Jewish people and to Shavuot as well. And the reason why I say that is that the Jews were slaves in Egypt. They were in a routine where nothing was happening during their years of persecution for decades. They were living a life of mundane and somewhat uneventful existence under slavery and persecution, until Hashem stepped in and decided to change the course of events and presented miracles of the plagues, which in turn decades happened in a matter of a few weeks during that time. And it's hard for us to comprehend even the enormity of one plague. I mean, we're seeing now what's going on with Corona, which I guess could be related to somewhat of a plague, but it's hard to comprehend the enormity of what the plagues were at the time, even one single miracle, let alone the numerous miracles which occurred in the space of a very short time after decades of pretty mundane nothingness. And then we find ourselves, after all of the miracles of the plagues, we find ourselves alone in the desert, almost in isolation. That is after the Shir HaShirim, which Jacob played for us earlier. And we find ourselves in isolation with no direction other than just to follow our noses under the leadership of Moshe Rabbeinu to wherever God told us to go to. And after a short while, even though we had seen all of these miracles and that God had shown us in front of our eyes, the Jewish people became restless, even turning their backs towards Hashem just before received the Torah, just because Moshe Rabbeinu was a little while longer than he should have been in returning from Har Sinai. But when we finally received the blueprint in the form of the Torah, it gave the Jewish people a guided set of rules, laws, meanings in their life, and a bit of direction. And we even told that to build a Mishkan, which is the sanctuary, to bring offerings and a house to hold the Holy Torah. And we needed to make it look beautiful. We needed to have gold, silver, lace, and with intricate detail. And even if we look at the Beit HaMikdash, which is an impressive holy building which surrounds the Torah, or even the Torah covering itself, it's very materialistic, and it's beautiful to look at. But we don't focus on that. We focus on what's inside the Torah itself. We focus on the essence of the Torah. We focus on the words of the Torah, and not the physicality of the surroundings of the Torah. The Torah is made of parchment. It's a very humble material. Even the commandments were made out of stone, not gold or silver or any fancy material, just made out of stone, which once again is very humble. But it's the words that count. It's the words that inside the Torah that really count. And so much has changed in the world in the last few weeks, I think. But the one thing that hasn't changed is the Torah. Nothing's changed. Not even in the last few weeks. In the last few centuries, the world has changed. But the Torah words have not changed in one bit. We haven't added a paragraph, we haven't added a letter, we haven't removed a paragraph which is not relevant. So I think the last few weeks, decades really have happened. I think to everyone, no one's been hidden, or no one has not been affected by what's been going on in the world. Lives have been lost, jobs have been lost, businesses have closed, houses of worship have closed, and we have been confined to our homes, which has so much has changed in that time. But the Torah hasn't changed, and we've had comfort from our daily minyanim, lessons from Rabbi Simon and Ruthie Simon, and even online. We've had the opportunity to learn. We've had the opportunity to have some introspection, time to spend with our family and friends and connecting. And I think it's just put us basically back to basics. We've been forced to become humble, just like the Torah values. And we've also had structure in our week with our Parsha continuing every week, which I think has given us comfort in that every week we know that there's Shabbat is coming. It's quite incredible to think that we've celebrated in the space of the time that we've, so to speak, been in lockdown. We've celebrated Pesach, Lag BaOmer, Rosh Chodesh, and now Shavuot. These are big moments, and we've experienced that under lockdown. Even though everything around us has shut, we've still been able to maintain that routine and just maintain the continuity of our Jewish values. And I think Shavuot is also known as Zman Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. The word is associated to matan, which is a gift, and Hashem's given us this gift as a personal connection between us and Hashem. But then we say to people, Kablat Torah besimcha uvpni miyot, which is receiving the Torah joyously and in a personal, impactful way. And even in the very first Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, it says that Moshe received the Torah, not Hashem gave us the Torah. So I think this has opened us up to receiving, to be able to be open to receiving the Torah and receiving the truth, really. And I believe Hashem has needed us to go back to basics. just to look inside ourselves, to not look at the physicality, not look at the buildings, not look at the money. Rather, Hashem's given us just the time to refocus on what is meaningful in our own lives, and allow us to be more open to receiving whatever it is that we are wanting to receive. And Hashem's given us the opportunity in these few weeks where our own personal decades can be made, rather than continuing to have decades happening with nothing being made. And I think, even the Torah could have been given to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, to our forefathers, and, they were all hugely worthy of receiving the Torah, but Hashem needed to give it to a nation. He needed to give it to a community to benefit from it, rather than a single individual. And I think, we are just very blessed to have Kesher and to have a community where Rabbi Simon and Ruthie continue to lead us, to send messages of encouragement and just messages of Torah. And I just wanted to, wish everyone that we just have a blessed and healthy Shavuot, first and foremost, and maybe just make our weeks count like decades, just to make it count.
Thank you very much.
Amazing, Wayne. I think that was wonderful. I actually think it's quite relevant that one of the first mitzvot that we received that after becoming a nation was the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh. And, we've all been enslaved, so to speak, in our houses right now. We're locked up in our houses. But what we do have is, as free men, we have the freedom of our own time. Yeah. And we are able to, as you say, the cyclical nation, the festivals and with the Rosh Chodesh and the Lag BaOmer and the Pesach and the Shavuot, we're still able to, we are free men, we are able to make our own time, to make our own davening, to continue as a free nation. So that's really beautiful.
Yeah, very true. But at the same time, in a way, I agree completely with Gina's observation. But because we don't have the structure of a work day, and even children going to school at a certain time, etc., because that structure is not, we're not confined by that structure. We have to exercise our own, not just self-control, but our own choices about how best to use our time. So as you say, we have the opportunity, but if we're not astute or alert, we can squander it as well, which is true for so much of life. That really reflects on life itself. And it's part of counting the Omer, actually, like many have said. It's not just counting days, but making days count. And certainly this Omer interval, we've had that opportunity, but equally that pitfall, probably as rarely in the past. So thank you, Wayne, and thank you to everyone. Thank you again to Paul and to Carl for heading up the recruitment, and to all of our excellent presenters. And it's really been wonderful. And I just want to say that there may be some who are staying up tomorrow night through the night to learn on your own or with members of your family. And if so, then that's a great kol hakavod. But if you want to knock off by around midnight or thereabouts and get a good night's sleep and daven in the reasonable hour, don't feel guilty about that option as well. It's perfectly acceptable, if that's your preference. And also, we have circulated a number of outstanding resources that are available to you. You can download them, you can print them, select chapters that appeal to you, and it's a way to enhance your Shavuos experience. And we look forward to the time very soon when we can get back together, see one another in person, not only through the wonders of electronic circuitry, but person to person as well. So again, Chag Sameach to one and all, and I want to commend everyone for their stamina as well. Those who are still standing at the late hours. So Kol HaKavod, Chag Sameach to one and all, and